My name is Blue Oak, and I am a Pokemon trainer. My father and mother both went to battle in the Pokemon War and were killed. My grandfather took me and my sister in and treated me like his own. I never liked my grandfather, which might be because he was never around to care for me. He always had his head in his book or his mind somewhere else thinking about Pokemon. I wondered about these Pokemon. I started to hate these things. They were taking my grandfather's life over and left no time with us. One day he called and said he needed me at the lab. I grabbed my coat and put on my shoes and walked to the lab. When I got there, I could not find my grandfather for the life of me. I had never been into the lab and realized how small it was. I started to look at all of his machines and tests when Red walked in. He quickly looked around and then left without saying a word. But then again, he never spoke that much, so I didn't take any notice of it. I looked around more and realized that Pokemon, the things that my grandfather spent years trying to understand, was way cooler than I have ever imagined. I've only ever seen a Rattata, and that was when my mom went to walk through Route 1 to go get some medicine for my sister. The Pokemon that my grandfather had been trying to research seemed way better. My grandfather walked in, Red right behind him. Red stood beside me and gave me a dirty look. I knew he hated me. We were rivals from the day we arrived. I asked why my grandfather requested me to the lab. He responded by saying we were getting our first Pokemon. I was surprised when he said that. I had made a change looking around the lab. It seemed to have trapped me into knowing that I was getting a Pokemon. He asked Red to choose first. I was disappointed at first. But I had figured out a loophole. I could choose the type strongest of the Pokemon that Red chooses. He picked Charmander. I walked over and directly went to Squirtle's Pokeball. This was the start to my adventure and the time of my life. Red started to leave when I suggested we have a battle. Before he could even blink an eye, there was a Squirtle standing on the lab's floor. He sent out his Charmander. Not even saying a word, Red's Pokemon charged towards mine and scratched him multiple times. Squirtle did not move after that. I had lost. A bad first impression can go a long way. Red left, not even saying good game or nice try. His Charmander looked up at me and scuttled after Red. I did not even see that my Squirtle had been beaten to almost the point of death. After that one battle, I knew that one day there was going to be a Charizard lying on the ground, not moving a muscle. That day would be no time soon, though. I did not see much of Red after that. The occasional battle here and there gained my hatred for the man. I had made my way through the gyms like it was butter. On the first day of my journey, I had completed one gym. Every day there came a new gym leader, until I had reached the very last gym. His name was Giovanni. I had adored Giovanni for much of my whole life. How he ruled a large team that had thoughts of taking over Kanto. I tried my best not to look like an idiot when I saw him. I threw out my Blastoise in hopes of me winning. A large Rhydon hit the floor. I could not call any commands for a while. I stood there admiring his Pokemon. Blastoise took a horn drill right into the gut. I got up, and an immediate Hydro Cannon came toward his Rhydon, making one of his Pokemon faint. This repeated to all of his Pokemon. I had won. I had challenged the leader of Team Rocket, and I had won. There was no time to celebrate. I needed to beat Red and obtain title of champion. I welcomed myself into the Elite Four. A lady introduced herself and said her name was Lorelei. I challenged her to a battle. That was an easy win. Next Elite Four to be destroyed was Bruno, the bulky man that loved the fighting type. There was no challenge in defeating him. Agatha was next. She was mean. She spoke of how my grandfather was wasting his time and money on Pokemon. This gave me the urge to work even harder to beat her. All of her Pokemon were easy. I walked down a long corridor into the Elite Four. I had never seen this fellow before. He wore a long blue cape with spiky red hair. I introduced myself and politely asked for a battle. Before I knew it, his Gyarados was on the ground. I took that he was a flying-type trainer, so I sent out my Blastoise, for he had Ice Beam. When the Gyarados fell to the ground, he sent out his Dragonite. With a simple Ice Beam, he was down. This continued till the end, where the final Ice Beam made me the winner. I was the champion. I walked into my very own chamber and gazed. I had done it. I was the champion of the Kanto League. I was waiting for Red. I knew he was coming. I only waited 15 minutes, and there he was. I was surprised to see him that quickly, but I had no time to think. There was already a Venusaur on the floor. I had to think quickly. Pidgeot was the best choice I had. I tried to aerial ace him, but it did minimal damage. One Giga Drain and Pidgeot was no more. I had to think of what I could do, and if what... Sadly, I did not have any good moves. The next best thing was my Alakazam. I tried to get off of Future Sight, but he had already Giga Drained. It was not enough to take Alakazam out. He was holding on for life. Alakazam managed to get a Psychic off, making his Venusaur faint. I felt like I had defeated Red, but there were still 5 Pokemon to defeat. Red threw out his next Pokemon. All I saw was a flash, and there stood a Pikachu. This Pikachu, the one that had beaten every gym leader. I have only heard myths of this cute Pokemon that can turn into anarchy in less than a second. Only a Thunderbolt could kill even a Dragonite. All my Pokemon needed to focus on was speed. It was the only thing that could keep my Pokemon alive. Only a quick attack made my Alakazam faint. I needed time to think of what Pokemon I should send out. Arcanine Speed would come in handy. There was now an Arcanine in the chamber. Arcanine managed to miss a Thunderbolt and attack with a crunch. He stumbled back and then immediately attacked with Thunder. There was now 3 of my Pokemon that were fainted on my team. Next was my Rhydon. I chose this because none of Pikachu's attacks were good against my Rhydon. He tried to Thunder, but it did nothing to my Rhydon. I summoned an Earthquake, making his Pikachu faint. The next Pokemon to enter with the battle was a Lapras. I felt like the world was going to end. Ice and water were both super effective against my Rhydon, and before I knew it, there was a blizzard coming my way. It was the one attack that had ended my Rhydon, and it seemed to end my whole life. I needed to save my Blastoise till the end. So out came my Executor. I knew that he could make my Executor faint with one blizzard, and so he did. There was only one Pokemon left on my team, the one that I had started my journey with, Blastoise. I had to send him out. It was my only choice. I needed my dream to come true. As he was getting sent out, I prayed that he would be the one that ended the battle. His Lapras jumped into the air even before he was sent out all the way. I knew that Lapras had Body Slam, so I informed my Blastoise to get out of the way. Lapras landed with a thump, hurting himself quite a bit. Blastoise did a quick Hydro Pump, and that was the last of Lapras. There was only 2 more Pokemon until I could face the almighty Charizard. A gigantic Snorlax came out with a great might. A blizzard took most of Snorlax's health. A Giga Impact nearly hit Blastoise, but it moved away just in time. Now was the ideal time to attack. A blizzard went down, crashing into Snorlax, making him no more. I felt like the time had come just to let loose and breathe, but I couldn't. There was too much going on to do that. A mighty Blastoise came out of its ball and stood there, waiting for action. I tried to get a Hydro Pump off, but he returned with another Hydro Pump. Water flew everywhere while the 2 Blastoise fired water at each other. I didn't see anything at all, but there was a Blastoise now laying on the ground. I could tell that it was his. All of his Pokemon were marked. This was the time that there would be a Charizard laying on the ground, not moving a muscle. He brought back his Blastoise and sent out his Charizard. I didn't have time to imagine that my dream can come true. I told my Blastoise to Hydro Pump, but I couldn't find Charizard. I looked at Red to see if he was looking at him, but he was looking straight into my eyes with a grim look. It looked like the devil had possessed him. I heard a wing flap, and I knew it was Charizard. He came swooping down and attacked my Blastoise. It was the time to release my Blastoise's power and go for a Hydro Pump. I didn't say anything. There was water going everywhere. I knew I had him. The water had stopped. I started to cheer when all of a sudden fire came towards me. He had survived the Hydro Pump and attacked Blastoise. It was over. There, in front of me, lay a Blastoise. I had failed myself. Red returned his Charizard, and my grandfather walked in. He gave a long speech, but I didn't listen. I was too busy trying to figure out what happened and what went wrong. After my grandfather and Red left, I fled the scene. After that, I never saw Red. And to this day, I am trying to find him, tear his Pokemon to pieces, and see that Charizard laying on the ground, not moving a muscle.